Dr. Sarah Chen had always been different from other humans. While her colleagues focused on treating symptoms, she obsessed over finding root causes. Her small medical practice in downtown Seattle had earned a reputation for taking on impossible cases, the ones other doctors gave up on. The morning everything changed started like any other. Sarah was reviewing lab results when her nurse, Maria, burst through the door with wide eyes. "Doctor, you need to see this patient immediately," Maria said, her voice shaking. "Room 3. I've never seen anything like it." Sarah followed Maria down the hallway, noting how the other staff members were whispering and pointing toward room 3. Whatever was behind the door had clearly spooked everyone. The patient was a middle-aged construction worker named Tom Bradley. He sat on the examination table, but something was terribly wrong with his appearance. His skin had a strange, grayish tint, and dark veins were visible across his arms and neck like a roadmap of infection. "When did this start?" Sarah asked, pulling on her gloves. Tom's voice was weak and raspy. 3 days ago. Started as a small cut on my hand from a rusty nail at the job site. By yesterday, these veins appeared. This morning, I could barely get out of bed." Sarah examined the original wound. It was small, barely an inch long, but the area around it was completely black. The infection had spread faster than anything she'd ever encountered in medical school or practice. "Have you been to any other doctors?" she asked. Tom nodded. "Emergency room yesterday. They gave me antibiotics and sent me home. Said it was just a bad infection. But look at me now." Sarah took blood samples and sent them to her lab for immediate analysis. While they waited, she researched similar cases online. Nothing matched what she was seeing. The pattern of infection, the speed of progression, the way it followed the lymphatic system, it was unlike any bacterial or viral infection in medical literature. 2 hours later, the lab results arrived. Sarah stared at the report in disbelief. Tom's white blood cell count was through the roof, but more concerning was something else in his blood, an unknown pathogen that didn't match any database. "This is impossible," Sarah muttered to herself. She ran the tests again, thinking there must be an error. The results came back identical. Over the next few hours, 3 more patients arrived with similar symptoms. All had been exposed to contaminated metal or soil in different parts of the city. All showed the same rapid progression of infection. By evening, Sarah realized she was dealing with something far beyond a simple medical case. She called the Centers for Disease Control, but they were skeptical. A new pathogen appearing simultaneously in multiple patients seemed unlikely to them. "Dr. Chen, we appreciate your concern, but what you're describing sounds like a variant of necrotizing fasciitis. Have you tried standard treatment protocols?" the CDC representative asked. "Of course I have," Sarah replied, frustrated. "None of the standard antibiotics are working. This pathogen is resistant to everything in my arsenal." That night, Sarah stayed late in her lab, studying blood samples under her microscope. What she saw chilled her to the bone. The pathogen wasn't just resistant to antibiotics, it seemed to be actively learning from them, adapting its structure each time she introduced a new treatment. Around midnight, she made a discovery that changed everything. Hidden in the genetic structure of the pathogen was something that shouldn't exist: artificial markers. This wasn't a natural infection at all. Someone had engineered this organism. Sarah's hands trembled as she double-checked her findings. The pathogen contained synthetic DNA sequences that could only have been created in an advanced laboratory. But why would anyone create such a deadly organism? And how was it spreading through the city? She called her mentor from medical school, Dr. Robert Hayes, who now worked for the military's Biological Research Division. "Robert, I need your help," she said when he answered. "I've discovered what appears to be a bioengineered pathogen spreading through Seattle. People are dying, and I can't stop it with conventional medicine." There was a long pause. "Sarah, you need to be very careful about what you're saying. Are you absolutely certain about these findings? I've run the tests a dozen times. This organism has artificial genetic markers. Someone created this thing. I'll make some calls, Robert said. In the meantime, document everything but don't share your findings with anyone else yet. After hanging up, Sarah returned to her lab work. She had 4 patients now, all rapidly deteriorating. Traditional medicine was failing, but perhaps there was another approach. She began thinking about her grandmother's stories from rural China, where traditional healers had used natural compounds to fight infections that Western medicine couldn't touch. Sarah had always dismissed these tales as folklore, but now she wondered if ancient wisdom might hold the key. Working through the night, Sarah researched traditional Chinese medicine, focusing on compounds known to have antimicrobial properties. One formula caught her attention, a combination of herbs that had reportedly been used to treat mysterious plagues in ancient times. The formula contained several unusual ingredients, a rare fungus found only in high-altitude regions, extracts from certain deep-sea algae, and minerals from specific mountain ranges. Most doctors would have laughed at the idea of using such remedies against a modern bioweapon, but Sarah was desperate. By dawn, she had located suppliers for most of the ingredients. The fungus was the hardest to find. Only one laboratory in the Pacific Northwest had samples, and they were normally used for cancer research. Sarah called Dr. Martinez, who ran the lab. I know this sounds crazy, but I need samples of Cordyceps militaris from your high-altitude collection. For what purpose? Dr. Martinez asked. I'm trying to save lives. I can't explain more than that right now, but people are dying from an infection that doesn't respond to any standard treatment. Something in Sarah's voice must have convinced him, because Dr. Martinez agreed to provide the samples immediately. While waiting for the ingredients to arrive, Sarah checked on her patients. Tom Bradley's condition had worsened overnight. The black veins now covered most of his body, and he was struggling to breathe. Doctor, he whispered when she entered his room. Am I going to die? Sarah looked into his frightened eyes. She could have given him false hope or medical platitudes, but she chose honesty. I don't know. But I'm working on something that might help. Just hold on a little longer. The ingredients arrived by courier that afternoon. Sarah began the delicate process of creating the compound, following the ancient formula but using modern precision in measurements and preparation. The resulting mixture was unlike anything she had ever created, a dark, viscous liquid with an unusual metallic scent. According to the ancient texts, it should be administered in small doses over several hours. Sarah faced the biggest decision of her medical career. She had no clinical trials, no peer review, no approval from any medical board. She only had a desperate hope based on thousand-year-old wisdom and, for patients who would likely die without intervention. She decided to test the compound on herself first. If it was toxic, she would rather risk her own life than her patients. Sarah injected a small amount into her arm and waited. Within minutes, she felt a strange warmth spreading through her body. Her heart rate increased slightly, but she felt no pain or discomfort. After 2 hours with no adverse effects, she made her decision. Sarah approached Tom Bradley's bedside. I want to try an experimental treatment. It's completely unproven, but it's based on compounds that have been used for centuries to fight serious infections. Tom's wife, who had been sitting by his bedside all day, looked up with tears in her eyes. Will it hurt him? I don't believe so, Sarah said. But I need to be honest, I don't know if it will work either. What I do know is that without trying something different, we're going to lose him. Tom's wife squeezed his hand. Do it, she said. Sarah carefully administered the first dose of the compound. For the first hour, nothing seemed to change. Tom's vital signs remained stable, but the black veins continued their spread. Then, something remarkable happened. The progression of the black veins slowed. Within 2 hours, they had stopped spreading entirely. By the 4th hour, the edges of the infected areas began to show signs of improvement. Sarah couldn't believe what she was seeing. She administered the compound to her other 3 patients, and each showed similar responses. The ancient formula was actually working against the bioengineered pathogen. As night fell, Sarah realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in modern medicine. A treatment derived from traditional healing practices was succeeding where cutting-edge antibiotics had failed. But she also knew this was just the beginning. If this pathogen was indeed a bioweapon, then someone had unleashed it deliberately. The question was why, and whether they planned to spread it further. Sarah spent the night documenting everything: her patients' responses, the exact formula she had used, and the timeline of improvement. She had stumbled upon something that could save lives, but she also suspected she had uncovered something much larger and more dangerous than a simple outbreak. By morning, all 4 patients showed significant improvement. The black veins were receding, their color was returning to normal, and their vital signs were stabilizing. Sarah had done the impossible: she had cured an incurable infection using methods that conventional medicine would have dismissed. But, as she celebrated this small victory, Sarah had no idea that her success had not gone unnoticed. Unknown to her, powerful forces were already moving to either claim her discovery or silence her permanently. 3 days after Sarah's breakthrough, men in black suits appeared at her clinic. They didn't knock or announce themselves, they simply walked in as if they owned the place. Dr. Chen, the lead man said, flashing credentials too quickly for her to read properly. Agent Morrison, Department of Health Security. We need to discuss your recent patients. Sarah's nurse, Maria, looked terrified. The waiting room had gone completely silent as the agents positioned themselves strategically around the clinic. I'm sorry, but patient information is confidential, Sarah replied, trying to keep her voice steady. If you have official requests, please submit them through proper channels. Agent Morrison smiled coldly. Dr. Chen, we're not here to follow normal procedures. Your patients were infected with a classified pathogen. Any treatment information falls under national security protocols. Classified pathogen? Sarah's heart raced. Are you admitting this was intentionally released? I'm not admitting anything. I'm ordering you to turn over all research, treatment records, and samples related to these cases. Immediately. Sarah realized she was in serious danger. If these people were willing to publicly threaten a doctor in her own clinic, they wouldn't hesitate to make her disappear if she refused to cooperate. The records are in my office, she said. But I need to see proper warrants first. Agent Morrison nodded to his colleagues, who began moving toward her office without waiting for permission. Dr. Chen, you don't understand the situation you're in. This pathogen was part of a controlled military research project. It was never supposed to be released, and your cure threatens to expose classified defense programs. As the agents ransacked her office, Sarah's mind raced. She had suspected the pathogen was artificial, but learning it was part of a military program changed everything. How had it escaped containment? Was this an accident or something more sinister? What about my patients? Sarah asked. They deserve to live. Your patients are being transferred to a military medical facility where they'll receive appropriate care, Morrison replied. They don't need military care, they need the treatment that actually works. The compound I developed is curing them. Morrison's expression hardened. The compound you developed using classified research methods that you had no authorization to access. Sarah realized with horror that they had been monitoring her all along. They knew about her research into traditional medicine, her late-night laboratory work, even her conversation with Dr. Hayes. You've been watching me, she said. Dr. Chen, when a civilian starts treating victims of biological warfare with mysterious compounds that shouldn't exist, yes, we take notice. The agents finished collecting her files and samples. As they prepared to leave, Morrison handed her a thick legal document. This is a national security non-disclosure agreement. You will not discuss these cases, your treatment methods, or this conversation with anyone. Violation will result in immediate arrest under the Espionage Act. After the agents left, Sarah sat alone in her destroyed office. They had taken everything: patient files, blood samples, even her computer hard drives. But they hadn't taken the most important thing, her memory of the formula. That evening, Sarah received a phone call that changed everything. Dr. Chen? This is Dr. Lu Wei from the Shanghai Institute of Traditional Medicine. I believe you recently used one of our ancestral formulas to treat a serious infection. Sarah's blood ran cold. How do you know about that? Because the formula you used was developed by my great-grandfather during the last plague outbreak in our region. And, because I've been tracking similar infections around the world. Similar infections? Dr. Chen, what happened in Seattle is not an isolated incident. We've seen outbreaks in 6 different countries over the past month. Each time, local doctors tried conventional treatments and failed. The pathogen appears to be the same engineered organism you encountered. Sarah felt the weight of this revelation. It's spreading globally? Yes, but there's more. Each outbreak site was near a military research facility. Someone is deliberately releasing this pathogen, but they made one critical error: they didn't account for traditional medicine. Dr. Liu explained that his institute had been quietly developing treatments based on ancient formulas, specifically targeting bioengineered pathogens. They had recognized that future warfare might involve artificial organisms that conventional medicine couldn't handle. Your success in Seattle proves our theories correct, Dr. Liu said. But now we need to work together before this spreads further. The government took all my research, Sarah said. They've classified everything under national security. Of course they did. But did they take your brain? That night, Sarah made a decision that would brand her as a traitor in some circles and a hero in others. She contacted Dr. Liu and began sharing everything she remembered about the formula and treatment protocol. Working in secret, they developed a plan to produce and distribute the cure through unofficial channels. Dr. Liu had connections with traditional medicine practitioners worldwide who could prepare and administer the treatment without government oversight. But Sarah soon discovered she wasn't the only one fighting back. Dr. Hayes, her former mentor, called her on an encrypted line. "Sarah, I need to tell you something about that pathogen," he said. "It wasn't accidentally released." "What do you mean?" "I've been investigating since you called me. The military didn't create this organism, someone stole the research and modified it. They've been releasing it in strategic locations to test both the pathogen's effectiveness and the global response capabilities." "Who would do such a thing?" "We think it's a rogue group within the defense contractor community. They're trying to create a crisis that will generate massive funding for biological defense programs." Sarah felt sick. They're killing innocent people to make money? Worse than that. They're planning to release the cure themselves, but only after the crisis reaches panic levels. They want to be seen as saviors while profiting from both the problem and the solution. "But I already developed a cure using traditional medicine." "Exactly. Your success threatens their entire plan. If people learn that ancient herbal remedies can defeat their engineered superweapon, it undermines their narrative about needing high-tech military solutions." Robert explained that the rogue group had allies within government agencies, which explained how they had moved so quickly to suppress Sarah's work. "They're planning a major release in New York City next week," Robert said. "Thousands could die before they reveal their miracle cure." Sarah knew she had to act. Working with Dr. Liu and a growing network of traditional medicine practitioners, she began preparing large quantities of the antidote. They couldn't prevent the attack, but they could be ready to respond immediately. The network included herbalists in Chinatowns across America, traditional healers on Native American reservations, and even some progressive doctors who were willing to risk their careers to save lives. But preparing the cure required rare ingredients that were difficult to obtain in large quantities. The high-altitude fungus was especially problematic. There simply weren't enough laboratory samples to treat thousands of patients. Dr. Liu had an idea that sounded impossible. There are wild populations of the fungus in the Tibetan mountains. If we could organize an expedition to harvest them directly. That would take weeks, Sarah protested. People will be dying in New York in 6 days. Not if we already have people in Tibet, Dr. Liu said with a smile. My institute has been preparing for biological warfare for years. We have teams stationed near every major population of medicinal fungi in Asia. Within 24 hours, Sarah received word that fresh fungus samples were being rushed to processing facilities in Hong Kong. From there, concentrated extracts would be shipped to traditional medicine practitioners across the United States. But the rogue group wasn't sitting idle. Sarah's clinic was broken into again, this time by people who left clear threats. Her car tires were slashed, and she began noticing the same vehicles following her around the city. Maria, her loyal nurse, quit after receiving threatening phone calls at home. "I'm sorry, Dr. Chen, but they called my children's school. I can't risk my family." Sarah understood. She was fighting a war against people with unlimited resources and no moral boundaries. But she also knew that thousands of lives depended on her success. Dr. Liu called with disturbing news. "Sarah, we've intercepted communications suggesting the New York attack will be much larger than we expected. They're planning to release the pathogen in the subway system during rush hour. Can we warn the authorities? With what proof? And how do we know who to trust within the government?" Sarah realized they were truly on their own. A small network of traditional healers and rogue scientists against a well-funded conspiracy with allies in the highest levels of power. But they had one advantage their enemies didn't expect: the power of ancient wisdom combined with modern determination. While the conspirators planned to profit from fear and death, Sarah's team was motivated by something far stronger: the simple desire to save lives. The night before the planned attack, Sarah received confirmation that treatment centers were ready in New York. Traditional medicine practitioners in Chinatown, Koreatown, and Little Italy had been quietly prepared. Native American health centers outside the city were standing by. Even some progressive hospitals had doctors ready to administer the ancient formula if needed. As Sarah prepared to travel to New York herself, she reflected on how much her life had changed in just 1 week. She had gone from treating routine infections to fighting a shadow war against bioterrorists. But she had also discovered something profound: sometimes the oldest wisdom was exactly what the modern world needed most. The formula her grandmother's people had used for centuries was about to save one of the world's greatest cities. Sarah packed her bags and prepared for the most important day of her medical career. She had no idea if her network would be enough to save thousands of lives, but she knew she had to try. Tomorrow, New York City would face its greatest biological threat in history. And standing against the threat would be an unlikely alliance of traditional healers, armed with nothing but ancient knowledge and unshakable determination. Sarah arrived in New York City at 5 a.m. on what she knew would be either her greatest triumph or final day of freedom. Dr. Liu had arranged for her to stay in Chinatown with Mrs. Chang, an elderly herbalist who had been preparing the antidote formula all night. The small apartment above Mrs. Chang's herb shop smelled like a forest after rain, filled with the earthy scents of dried roots, mushrooms, and minerals. Dozens of glass containers lined the shelves, each containing ingredients that most Western doctors had never heard of. "Dr. Chen," Mrs. Chang said in accented English, "I have prepared 50 doses, but if the attack is as large as you fear, we will need much more." Sarah examined the dark, viscous liquid in the prepared vials. It looked identical to what she had created in Seattle, but she knew that consistency would be crucial for treating hundreds or thousands of victims. "How quickly can you prepare more?" Sarah asked. Mrs. Chang smiled sadly. "The fungus extract takes 4 hours to properly brew. The mineral solutions need 2 hours to stabilize. If people start dying at 8 a.m., I cannot save them all." Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Robert. "Intelligence suggests release time is 7:45 a.m. during morning rush hour. Multiple subway stations. Expect chaos." She showed the message to Mrs. Chang, whose weathered face grew grim. "Then, we must distribute what we have to the practitioners who are closest to the subway stations. Each one must be ready to treat patients immediately." They spent the next hour making final preparations. Mrs. Chang had contacted 12 other traditional medicine practitioners across the city, each with their own supply of the antidote. Sarah reviewed the locations on a map, noting with relief that they had good coverage of the areas most likely to be affected. At 6:30 a.m., Sarah's secure phone rang. It was Dr. Liu calling from Shanghai. Sarah, we've intercepted more communications. The attack is definitely happening, but there's something else. The conspirators have their own antidote ready to deploy, but they're planning to wait until at least 500 people are infected before they discover it. 500 people, Sarah whispered in horror. It gets worse. Their antidote is actually a modified version of the same formula you developed. They reverse-engineered it from the samples they took from your clinic. Sarah felt rage building in her chest. These people had stolen her cure and were planning to let hundreds die before using it to make themselves heroes. There's one more thing, Dr. Liu continued. They know about our network. Someone leaked information about our preparations. Sarah's blood went cold. How is that possible? We're not sure, but you need to assume they'll try to stop us from treating patients. Be careful who you trust. At 7 a.m., Sarah left Mrs. Chang's shop and made her way to the subway station at Canal Street. She carried a medical bag containing vials of the antidote, hoping desperately that she wouldn't need to use them. The morning commute was in full swing. Thousands of people packed the platforms and trains, unaware that they were about to become victims of an unprecedented bioweapon attack. Sarah positioned herself near the main entrance where she could respond quickly to any outbreak. Her phone was connected to a group chat with all the traditional medicine practitioners in their network. At 7:43 a.m., her phone exploded with messages: strange smell reported at Times Square station, people collapsing at Grand Central, multiple casualties at Union Square. The attack was happening exactly as predicted, but it was larger than anyone had anticipated. The conspirators had released the pathogen at 6 different subway stations simultaneously. Sarah ran down into the Canal Street station and immediately smelled the same metallic odor she remembered from Seattle. Passengers were stumbling around, confused and disoriented. Within minutes, the first victims began collapsing. She knelt beside a young woman who had fallen near the ticket turnstiles. The woman's skin was already showing the telltale grayish tint, and dark veins were beginning to appear on her hands. "I'm a doctor," Sarah told the gathering crowd. "Everyone needs to evacuate this station immediately and seek medical attention if you feel any symptoms." But, even as she spoke, she knew the conventional medical system would be overwhelmed within hours. Emergency rooms would fill with patients that doctors couldn't help, and the death toll would climb rapidly. Sarah administered the first dose of antidote to the collapsed woman, then called Mrs. Chang. "It started. I need you to bring all remaining supplies to Canal Street Station." "I'm already on my way," Mrs. Chang replied. "The other practitioners are reporting the same thing, multiple victims at each location." Over the next hour, chaos engulfed Lower Manhattan. Emergency services were overwhelmed as hundreds of people flooded hospitals with symptoms that no conventional doctor could treat. The media began reporting a mysterious outbreak in the subway system. Sarah worked frantically to treat victims as they were brought to makeshift triage areas. Mrs. Chang arrived with a cart full of supplies, and together they began administering the antidote to anyone showing symptoms. The response was dramatic. Patients who had been near death began showing improvement within hours. The black veins receded, color returned to their skin, and their vital signs stabilized. But Sarah quickly realized they had a new problem. News crews were filming everything, and government agents were arriving in force. The conspiracy's plan seemed to be working perfectly: create a crisis, let it build to panic levels, then swoop in as saviors. Agent Morrison appeared at Sarah's makeshift treatment station, flanked by military personnel. "Dr. Chen, you're under arrest for interfering with a federal emergency response." "I'm saving lives with a treatment that actually works," Sarah replied, not stopping her work with patients. "You're using an unauthorized experimental drug during a public health crisis. That's a federal crime." Mrs. Chang stepped between Sarah and the agent. "This man does not understand what he is saying. This medicine has been used for 1,000 years. It is not experimental. Your chemical medicines are experimental." More patients were arriving every minute, and the traditional medicine network was struggling to keep up. Sarah realized that even with their preparation, they couldn't save everyone. That's when something unexpected happened. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez from Mount Sinai Hospital arrived with a team of nurses. Dr. Chen, we've been watching the news coverage. Your treatment is working while ours isn't. We need to learn your methods immediately. Agent Morrison stepped forward. Dr. Rodriguez, you're interfering with classified protocols. Dr. Rodriguez turned on him with fury. There are children dying in my emergency room from something I can't treat. If this woman has a cure, I'm going to use it whether you like it or not. Within minutes, more medical professionals began arriving. Word had spread through the hospital networks that traditional medicine practitioners were successfully treating victims while conventional medicine was failing. Sarah began teaching the hospital teams how to prepare and administer the antidote. The process was complex, but the doctors were quick learners when lives were at stake. As the afternoon wore on, something remarkable began happening. The collaborative treatment effort was actually working. Death rates were dropping dramatically in areas where traditional and conventional medicine were working together. But the conspirators weren't giving up. Sarah received word that government forces were moving to shut down all the traditional medicine treatment sites. They're claiming we're operating unlicensed medical facilities, Dr. Liu reported via phone. They want to force all patients into conventional hospitals where they can control the narrative. Sarah looked around at the scene near Canal Street Station. Dozens of patients were recovering under the joint care of traditional healers and hospital doctors. Chinese herbalists worked alongside EMTs, Native American medicine women taught nurses how to identify treatment responses, and Korean acupuncturists helped manage patient pain during recovery. They can try to shut us down, Sarah said, but look around. We've created something they didn't expect. Mrs. Chang nodded knowingly. When people see the truth with their own eyes, no government can hide it. The truth was spreading faster than the government could contain it. Social media was filled with videos of patients recovering dramatically under traditional medicine treatment. Families were demanding access to the herbal antidote that was saving lives while conventional hospitals struggled. By evening, Sarah realized that the conspiracy had backfired in the most spectacular way possible. Instead of creating panic that would lead to massive funding for biological defense programs, they had accidentally proven that ancient wisdom could defeat modern bioweapons. Major news networks were running stories about the miracle cure that combined traditional Chinese medicine with modern medical care. The governor of New York was demanding answers about why the federal government had tried to prevent the use of effective treatments. But Sarah knew the fight wasn't over. The conspirators still had powerful allies and unlimited resources. They wouldn't accept defeat easily. As night fell over New York City, Sarah stood on the steps of Mrs. Chang's herb shop and looked out at a city that had been transformed. Traditional medicine practitioners from dozens of cultures were working openly with hospital doctors. Community healing centers had sprung up in neighborhoods across all 5 boroughs. What happens now? Mrs. Chang asked. Sarah thought about everything that had changed in just 2 weeks. She had gone from treating routine infections in Seattle to helping save one of the world's greatest cities using medicine that was older than recorded history. Now we make sure this never happens again, Sarah said. And we make sure the world learns what we've discovered here. She had no idea that her words were being recorded by news crews, or that they would become the rallying cry for a global movement that would forever change how humanity approached medicine and healing. The conspiracy had wanted to create fear and profit from chaos. Instead, they had accidentally sparked a revolution that would unite ancient wisdom with modern science in ways that neither could achieve alone. 6 months after the New York attack, Sarah Chen sat in a congressional hearing room facing a panel of senators who couldn't decide whether to call her a hero or a criminal. The hearing was being broadcast live worldwide, and the testimony would determine the future of how humanity responded to biological threats. Senator Williams, the committee chairman, leaned forward. Dr. Chen, you administered an untested treatment to hundreds of people during a national emergency. How do you justify bypassing all FDA protocols and safety regulations? Sarah looked out at the packed gallery. She could see Mrs. Chang in the front row, along with dozens of patients whose lives had been saved by the traditional medicine network. Dr. Liu had flown in from Shanghai, and traditional healers from 6 continents were present to witness this moment. Senator, with respect, the treatment wasn't untested. It had been used successfully for over 1,000 years. What was untested was the bioweapon that nearly killed hundreds of innocent people. The hearing had been going on for 3 days. Sarah had testified about everything: her discovery of the engineered pathogen, the government's attempts to suppress her research, the conspiracy to profit from biological warfare, and the unprecedented collaboration between traditional and modern medicine that had saved New York. The most explosive testimony had come from Robert Hayes, her former mentor, who had provided evidence that the rogue conspiracy included high-ranking officials in the Department of Defense and executives from major pharmaceutical companies. The plan was elegant in its cruelty, Robert had explained to the stunned senators. Create a crisis with a bioengineered pathogen, let conventional medicine fail spectacularly, then introduce their revolutionary cure at premium prices. They would have made billions while positioning themselves as humanity's saviors. But the conspiracy had one fatal flaw: they had underestimated the power of traditional medicine and the determination of people like Sarah Chen. Senator Martinez, who represented a district with a large Hispanic population, asked Sarah about the broader implications of her work. Dr. Chen, your success seems to suggest that our entire approach to medicine might be fundamentally flawed. Are you saying that traditional healing methods are superior to modern science? Sarah had been preparing for this question for months. Senator, I'm not saying traditional medicine is superior. I'm saying it's complementary. The ancient formula I used worked because it approached the problem differently than synthetic antibiotics. But I needed modern laboratory techniques to verify the pathogen, modern communication to coordinate the response, and modern hospitals to provide supportive care. She gestured toward the gallery. Look at the results. Mrs. Chang's 1,000-year-old formula combined with Dr. Rodriguez's emergency medicine saved hundreds of lives. Neither approach could have succeeded alone. The hearing had revealed shocking details about the scope of the conspiracy. The rogue group had been planning similar attacks in London, Tokyo, and Mumbai. They had stockpiled their synthetic antidote and prepared marketing campaigns to position themselves as biodefense heroes. But Sarah's success in New York had ruined their plans. When traditional medicine proved effective against their unstoppable bioweapon, it destroyed their narrative and exposed their conspiracy. Senator Chen, no relation to Sarah, asked about the international response. Dr. Chen, we've received reports that your methods are being adopted by medical systems worldwide. Can you explain this phenomenon? Sarah smiled, thinking about the incredible changes that had occurred since New York. Senator, what happened wasn't just about one cure for one disease. It demonstrated that traditional knowledge systems contain solutions to problems that modern science hasn't been able to solve alone. The ripple effects had been extraordinary. Medical schools were establishing new programs that combine traditional healing with modern medicine. The World Health Organization had created an international traditional medicine research network. Indigenous communities that had been marginalized for centuries were suddenly being consulted as experts on biological threats. Dr. Liu had testified earlier about the global transformation. In Shanghai, we now have integration centers where traditional Chinese medicine practitioners work alongside Western doctors. Patient outcomes have improved dramatically for everything from cancer to autoimmune diseases. But not everyone was celebrating the changes. The pharmaceutical industry was fighting back, claiming that unregulated traditional medicines posed public health risks. Senator Blake, who had received substantial campaign contributions from pharmaceutical companies, pressed Sarah on this point. Dr. Chen, how can we ensure public safety when people are using unregulated herbal remedies instead of FDA-approved medications? Senator, the FDA-approved medications failed completely during the New York attack. The traditional medicine that saved lives had been safely used for centuries by millions of people. Sarah had grown stronger and more confident during the months of testimony, congressional hearings, and media interviews. She had learned to speak truth to power without backing down. More importantly, she continued, we're not talking about replacing modern medicine. We're talking about integration. Mrs. Chang's herb shop now works directly with Mount Sinai Hospital. Patients receive the best of both approaches under proper medical supervision. The hearing was interrupted by a commotion in the gallery. Agent Morrison, who had been under investigation since the New York incident, was being escorted out in handcuffs. The criminal investigation had finally reached the highest levels of the conspiracy. Senator Williams called for order. Dr. Chen, regardless of the criminal aspects of this case, Congress needs to make decisions about future policy. What do you recommend? Sarah had thought about this moment for months. Her answer would influence how humanity prepared for future biological threats. I recommend that we learn from what happened in New York. Traditional knowledge systems aren't primitive superstitions, they're sophisticated medical technologies that have been tested by millions of people over thousands of years. We need research programs that study traditional medicines with the same rigor we apply to synthetic drugs. She paused, looking directly at the cameras that were broadcasting her words around the world. But, more than that, we need to change how we think about healing. The conspiracy succeeded as long as people believed that only high-tech solutions could solve complex problems. When we opened our minds to ancient wisdom, we found solutions that modern science had missed. Dr. Rodriguez had testified about the practical changes at her hospital. We've established a traditional medicine integration unit. Patients can now access acupuncture, herbal medicine, and other traditional therapies alongside conventional treatment. Our recovery rates have improved across almost every category of disease. The most powerful testimony had come from the patients themselves. Tom Bradley, the construction worker who had been Sarah's first patient in Seattle, described his recovery. I was dying, and the best doctors in the country couldn't help me. Then, Dr. Chen gave me some herb tea that looked like swamp water, and, within hours I was getting better. If she hadn't been brave enough to try something different, I wouldn't be here today. Similar stories had emerged from around the world. The bioweapon attack had been thwarted not by military technology or pharmaceutical research, but by the collective wisdom of traditional healers working together across cultural boundaries. Senator Williams asked the final question that everyone had been waiting for. Dr. Chen, if you had to do it all over again, would you make the same choices? Sarah thought about everything that had happened, the threats, the government pressure, the risk to her career and freedom. She thought about the patients who had been saved and the global movement that had emerged. Senator, I became a doctor to save lives. When people were dying from something that conventional medicine couldn't treat, I had a choice: follow regulations and watch them die, or try something that might work and face the consequences. She looked out at the gallery filled with patients, healers, and doctors who had joined the movement. I chose to save lives. I would make that same choice again, every single time. The hearing ended with applause that lasted for several minutes. But Sarah knew that the real victory wasn't in the congressional chambers, it was in the hospitals, clinics, and healing centers where traditional and modern medicine were working together to help people in ways that neither could achieve alone. As she left the hearing room, Mrs. Chan walked up to her with a smile. Dr. Chen, my great-grandmother's recipe has now saved people on every continent. She would be very proud. Sarah hugged the elderly herbalist who had become her closest mentor. Mrs. Chang, this is just the beginning. We've shown the world that ancient wisdom and modern science can work together. Now we need to keep building that partnership. Outside the Capitol building, reporters surrounded Sarah with questions about her future plans. She had received offers from universities, pharmaceutical companies, and government agencies around the world. I'm going back to practicing medicine, she announced. But, this time, I'm opening an integration center where traditional healers and modern doctors will work together to treat patients and train the next generation of healers. As Sarah walked away from the Capitol, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had started as a conventional doctor who happened to be curious about traditional medicine. She was ending as a bridge between two worlds of healing that had been separated for too long. The bioweapon conspiracy had intended to demonstrate human vulnerability to engineered threats. Instead, it had revealed humanity's greatest strength, the ability to combine ancient wisdom with modern knowledge to solve problems that neither could solve alone. Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Liu, first class of integrated medicine graduates ready in Shanghai. When can you come teach them about courage? Sarah smiled as she typed her response. Courage isn't something you can teach. It's something you discover when lives depend on doing the right thing, regardless of the consequences. The revolution that began with one doctor's willingness to trust ancient wisdom had grown into a global movement. And, somewhere in a small herb shop in Chinatown, Mrs. Chang was already preparing remedies for the next crisis, knowing that this time, the world would be ready.